Hello, everybody, and welcome back to The Advisor with Stacey Chillemi. I'm very excited today because we have a very special guest on our show today. But before we begin, I just want to give a quick shout out to our sponsors who make this show happen. I'd like to thank iHeartRadio and I'd like to thank Spreaker for sponsoring this show. And right now, I'm very excited because we have Lucy Ayres, and she is just an amazing individual. She is a coach and she's a leadership coach, and she focuses on specific areas of leadership. And she has an amazing story to tell, and she has some great advice about leadership and about specific things when it comes to families and separation and other things that affect life traumatically. So, Lucy, I am so honored to have you on the show today. You were telling me a little about yourself and some of the things that you like to focus on when it comes to leadership coaching. You mentioned that one of the things that really draw to you is helping mothers who are separated and helping their families. And I was just wondering, why did you become so compassionate and about that area? Where did it all begin?
That's a great question. Hi. Thank you for having me. It's amazing to be here. Okay, why did I become compassionate about this? Well, a couple of things. I come from psychology as usual. I've always had an interest in people and helping, being there, supporting, listening. I moved over to coaching pretty quickly and also positive psychology because of the forward intent of the support. I like the idea that we're helping people make a change.
Hmm.
And I've been a leadership coach for 20 plus years now. And within my activity of coaching high level leaders in large organizations, obviously I met a number of women leaders and
Hmm.
worked with them. And not often, but often enough that it touched me deeply. I met women going through separation who had children and who were really struggling to stay afloat, to keep, all the balls in the air, to survive emotionally.
Hmm.
Now, one of my main interests in leadership, coaching and development is resilience, emotional intelligence, and psychological safety, which is an area I do research in as well.
Right.
So these, when we talk about resilience in positive psychology, we talk not only about the ability to bounce back, but the ability to bounce forward. And
Right.
so I really started just enjoying supporting these women leaders, not only with their corporate goals, because it was often in organizations I was coaching them, but also working out how to support them to take leadership of other areas of their life.
Right.
And this has pretty naturally evolved into a program where now I support separated mothers.
Hmm.
Um, Often in the early stages, i.e., the first 18 or 24 months after their separation, but sometimes longer afterwards. And I support them to recover and make decisions and grow basically from the situation and from the adversity they faced. And there are several phases to that. So it's, I've developed this program, which is hybrid coaching and group coaching. There's some group coaching or group sessions rather than group coaching, and daily practices. Everything I do is evidence-based. So the idea is taking the science, what science tells us works, but then finding out for each person how we're going to adapt it so it's comfortable for them and integrate it into their day-to-day because they don't have time. And the idea is to help people move forward and, yeah, take leadership, design the life they want for themselves. So first understand that and then move forward and take steps to doing that. And I would say the last the huge impact for me as in supporting people and that guided me towards this was the feedback I was getting from these women leaders regarding how they were seeing their children shift in their approach to difficulties too,
Hmm.
and how their relationship with their children had been positively impacted by working through these things together. And so it's very much, it's the biggest legacy we can leave our kids if we can teach them how to be resilient and face adversity, embrace it to a degree, or cope when you have to, but learn and grow from it. Don't let it push you down.
Right.
Make sure it brings you up, because we'll all face something difficult in life.
Yes, that's so true. That's so true. Now, you really have a compassion when it comes to helping high achieving women who are separated and have children. Do you find that a lot of women have a hard time breaking away, and because I had an aunt and uncle that stayed, they separated and they separated for over 15 years and they lived down the block from each other, but they didn't want to live with each other. And they didn't have children, but they had a better relationship living away from each other than they did underneath the same household. But if they had children, I'm sure the children would have been affected greatly, by the behavior, that they would have seen. And one of the things you had mentioned earlier when we were talking about is that a lot of times, children will copy their parents' behavior and they will look for partners that have the same type of behaviors, not even realize that it's subconsciously. Like, yeah, their father figure might have certain qualities, and when they go to look for a relationship, they're looking for the same type of person. And if that person has either abusive tendencies or behaviors or just unhealthy behaviors in the way they just demonstrate themselves, it could have a big effect on the child and their future. What are some of the things that you work with when it comes to a high achieving woman who's in an unhealthy relationship and she's separated, but she's not making the step forward to actually end the relationship and move forward? What would you say to somebody who is kind of stuck and afraid to take the next step?
Yeah, that's a great question. And so first, I would say, and this isn't a sort of feminist um sort of approach, but I would say all women are high achieving. So I really don't go, oh, you're high achieving and you're not, because I think if you're juggling children, life, separation, you're high achieving. So
Hmm.
so that's
Yes.
probably my first comment. Then you're right. Often, one of the things that actually makes people shift the way they see things is when I ask them what would be their response if 20 or 30 years along the line, their child came to them and described the relationship they're showing them now as being theirs. What would they say to them?
Yes.
And that makes, as mothers, we don't think about ourselves enough sometimes.
Yeah, that's very
But
true.
when we realize the impact it might have on our children, to stay in unhealthy cycles, to even the relationship we have with our ex, how we
Yeah.
co-parent,
Hmm.
is going to influence what our children do later in life. And
Yes.
sometimes if we don't make the change for ourselves, we make it for our children.
Yes.
And I'm not recently separated, but I'm a single mum, and that
Hmm.
is exactly the question I asked my partner to make the decision or not. And I said to him, and there was nothing hugely wrong with the relationship. It wasn't a toxic relationship or anything. It just wasn't going well. And I
Hmm.
said to him, okay, if in 25 years' time our daughter comes to see you and describes her relationship, describes what we have, but it's her relationship, what would you say to her? And he said, I'd tell her to get out. And I think there was a pretty big step in both of us going, okay, we need to model
Hmm.
what's right for our children and what we hope they will see.
Yes.
Um, And so the impact of supporting separated mothers works for them, and but often what drives them is the impact they're having on their children. I
Hmm.
support the mothers, but I know the reach is much further than just that.
Yes. I think that's a great way because if you turn the tables and you make them think, well, would you want this for your child? Then all of a sudden the way they're thinking, they start to really, well, no, of course I don't want that for my child. Well, if you don't want it for your child, then why do you want it for yourself? And that sometimes can be a wake-up call, and I think for a lot of people too.
Yeah, and it's what are you showing them if this isn't acceptable? Why are you
Yeah.
showing them this way of doing things? Um, and it's yeah, it's just very often we don't do it for ourselves. But sometimes you hear people say, "But it's okay, I'll cope," and they
Yeah.
will, but they might recover 3, 4 years down the line.
Hmm.
And I'm no doubt people do know how to draw upon their resources. What worries me is the impact that 3, 4 years might have on the children,
Yeah.
which is where my movement to go now. I need to produce something to support everyone, so that these are things, so that we can talk about things as well. So the parents and mothers in particular know how much to share with their children,
Yes.
because there's no point going around saying I'm fine if they're not, but they can't go into, bad mouthing the dad. Kids
Yes.
have to feel safe. They have to be able to love both their parents, whatever their parents are doing. So it's a very delicate balance, and there are very well researched and grounded strategies that can be used.
Hmm.
A lot of them, some of us know. It's then how do we integrate them with our
Yeah.
life, and what is best for us? Because you might have 10 strategies, and if you try two and they don't work, it gets tiring and you give up. So the idea my job is to listen for what could work, and then
Yes.
try and refine that, integrate it into people's lives, because they don't have time.
Hmm.
Definitely. Single mothers don't
Exactly.
have time.
I find that a lot of times people know there's a problem, but they're in denial. They don't want to accept, what's going on around them. What's your advice for people who know that, there is a problem, but they're in denial. They don't want to accept what's going on. They're not being honest with themselves. Why do you think they're not being honest, and how do they go about actually turning the tables and becoming more honest and accepting of what's going on in their life?
Mm. So I think there are two reasons, two main reasons. Obviously, humans are hugely complex, so a lot comes in. But the two main reasons I see are the not acknowledging that there's a grief process, that we have to grieve the loss of the future we'd imagined.
Yes.
That is huge. And so, and with that comes the acceptance that that's gone. So
Mm-hmm.
that is one of the reasons, because it's scary to do it on your own. It's really scary because it feels like, opening a door and there being vacuum behind it. There's no, what can I step into? So creating that scaffolding, helping people, giving them stepping stones, telling them where they're putting their feet,
Hmm.
is helpful. The other thing is people are just, they don't know how to go about it.
Yeah.
Just beyond the grieving, but also how do I live my life? How do I balance being a
Hmm.
mum? Everyone says take care, there's a lot of
Yeah.
self-care. Take care of yourselves, but I don't have time for bubble bath and massage. So what comes in? I don't have time, don't have money. What will really help me?
Yes.
And an interesting thing that happens, some of the people I support, and I always speak to them first, but the program is something other people, their parents often have given them as gifts. So it's really
Mhm.
interesting because it's come from grandparents going,
Yeah.
this is going to be my Christmas present to you if you want it, because obviously I won't take registration unless I've spoken to people and
Yeah.
they're happy and they've had time to think about it. But it's, yeah, it's that whole, I have too many balls in the air. If I stop what I'm doing, it might all just fall to the ground. How do I
Right.
carry on juggling? And it's that going, okay, I'll take some of those for you for a while, just so you can take your breath. And then
Hmm.
we can decide which of these, have a good look at them, because they might not all still be useful. What do you want to focus on? You know,
Yes.
what do they mean to you? So it's that intermediate phase of going from the chaos, emotional, practical, financial, the whole practicalities of relationships beyond, co-parenting, not co-parenting. Am I on my own? Who do I reach out to?
Right.
It's, I have memories as a single parent going, oh my goodness, I have this situation with my child and I have nobody to turn to discuss it with. So
Yeah.
it's creating scaffolding. Who do we have in our environment that we trust, who we can turn to for advice if there's no other parent,
Hmm.
because it's a huge responsibility to be the only parent.
Yes.
And it's another thing I see, but I see in adults who have been the children of single mothers in particular, but also single fathers, is that they've grown up too quickly. They've had to take on responsibilities that weren't theirs.
Hmm.
And this can create, relationship problems with our parents 20, 30 years along the line.
Yes.
Or it can create very premature sense of responsibility, and that has an impact.
Hmm.
So it's, how do we talk to our children so that they stay children, but we're still being honest? And you know, that's not something anyone teaches you.
Yeah.
You're pretty much on your own.
Yeah.
And I think it's the pretty much being on your own with so many questions. And that's why I run it as a program. I have one-to-one coaching sessions throughout, at the beginning, middle, and towards the end. But I also have group sessions with questions because, it helps to know there are other people in the same boat
Yeah.
that
Hmm.
are facing similar challenges, or ones that we might even feel are worse, and go, okay, or somebody who's come through something, and that's an idea.
Yes.
The collective intelligence is huge in this type of process, but also just feeling there are other people on that same path.
Hmm.
And intentionally, I don't create a Facebook group because I don't want that group to become a moaning group. And
Mm.
often what we do when we want support, we turn to people who love us, and they are hurt too when we're hurt. And so we
Yes.
tend to go into that mode with our friends or with our family where we're angry or critical and so on. And where those may be valid at some point, and they're not going to help us move forward. And so
Yes.
the idea is to create a group moving towards a form of self-healing and growth. And the word healing is always a bit difficult for me as a leadership coach.
Yeah. Hmm.
Um, but yes, that's what we're talking about. And just not being alone in that sort of direction as
Right.
well, from that situation. Because you can join groups of separated parents, but the risk is you'll be pulled down.
Yes.
And so this is a pretty carefully crafted group
Hmm.
where what is integrated contributes to the growth of all.
Uh, Definitely, 100%. I think it's so important to have people around you that you could talk to, that you could relate to. And it feels so good to know that you're not alone. But you do have to keep that group positive, because you can't be like the oh poor me, and then everybody, starts whimpering about, about the things that aren't going well in their relationships and their lives. And then before you know it, it becomes more negative than uplifting. And that's something you really want to avoid too. But definitely, I think when you have group sessions, it's great because you see that you're not alone and that you feel supported. and that people are understanding that you're going through what they're going through, and you feel that bond, that closeness with people that you don't even barely know, but yet you have that one thing in common, and that, and the support from each other can really go a long way.
Mm-hmm. And it's very much, it's not about denying the negative. The negative is there. We acknowledge the pain. We acknowledge, we speak to it all, but rather than wallow in it, we go,
Hmm.
okay, how can we use this in a way that's going to be supportive to ourselves and to other people?
Yes.
And it's sort of, it also helps us when we learn how to respond to somebody else's suffering. We find out which strategies are most natural to ourselves, to us, and we can apply that to ourselves. So that's why the group sessions are also really important. But then there
Hmm.
are one-to-one sessions, and there are sort of tailored practices on a daily basis. But it the one-to-ones are important because each situation is unique. But then knowing and learning from our interactions is huge as well. So I really wanted to keep those two aspects and sort of have this hybrid system.
Right.
Not coaching, it's not a training program, it's not group coaching, it's not
Yes.
therapy. It's very much tailored to the needs of mothers going in this particular phase of separating, being separated, and the challenges that go with co-parenting or not co-parenting, as sometimes is the case.
Right. Now, if someone asked you, because a lot of people don't even know where to begin, they're kind of lost, what would be step one in your eyes, what a person needs to start doing to get on the right pathway to healing and to be able to move forward in life? What would you say, step one is that people have to acknowledge and start to maybe incorporate in their daily life?
There are several approaches. The overarching point is, what do you like about yourself, and are you valuing it? It's sort of, there are times when you thought I was a kid, you know, what made you feel great? And sometimes it's going back to childhood friends. Sometimes it's having conversations with people who don't see you as the separated mother, where there's
Mm-hmm.
not that failure, which is how we see it. It's we
Yeah.
tend to take the responsibility, um, and going, who am I really? So that I can start understanding what I want. And
Yes.
yes, I wanted that, but that's not there.
Right.
And it's the acknowledging that I still have wants,
Mm-hmm.
and I can, that it's accepting that want has gone, our ideal future as we'd formulated it.
Yes.
Hindsight, often people say, oh my goodness, I knew. There was always a sign, an early sign, where they said I should never have gone there anyway.
Yeah.
But it comes later. So that's not something you can leverage
Right.
until people have gone through that grief and acceptance of what they thought was their future, in order
Mm-hmm.
to start going, okay, who am I really? Let's
Right.
remember who I am. And typically you see a lot of people, one of the standard things is a lot of people say they went back to their ex. That's why people are trying to find out who they were before. It's
Yeah.
really nothing more than that. So there's a more solid way of doing that. There's a safer way. So
Yeah.
those are the processes we go through. What are people's strengths? What have they always done and enjoyed?
Yeah.
And it's leveraging what comes from inside rather than what we took on from outside.
Right. Right. I like that a lot. I
So
I
it's
think
the acceptance, really. The first step is, okay, this is what it is.
hmm
And it's a huge one. The words are few, but my goodness, it's a big, big step.
yes.
Um,
Huge step. How
and
do you
sometimes
get
you start with this might be what it is. Sometimes you have to start with this might be.
okay.
what it
Because I
is.
was going to say, how do you get people to actually accept it for what it is? Because it can be straight and right in their face, but yet they don't want to accept it. So you start with might, it might be, and then that's kind of like the smooth way of kind of getting into it.
Yeah, you start with a practice that's actually drawn from emotional intelligence. You go on what we call if then scenarios. So you go, if this happens, then if this happens, then. And so you start, you know, imagining futures if then. And so and you go to, the two extremes. How bad can it get and how good can it get? And some in the middle. So that people can start formulating a path forward in
Right.
different contexts, because again we never know what's going to happen.
Now you have a separated mothers program. Can you tell me a little about
Yeah,
that?
so that's what I was saying. It's very much this hybrid program. People, it's a 12-week program, so the idea is to embed the practices into our everyday lives so that they become reflex rather than effort.
Yes.
um, and so there are 3 one-to-one coaching sessions, one at the start, one in the middle, one at the end. There are weekly group sessions, and then there are practices daily. I try and tailor to different types of people. Some people, like writing, so there's a system where they can write some notes and so on, and I can give them feedback on that. Or we do it with WhatsApp voice messages.
Mm-hmm.
Some people like to draw. It's so I have a platform where people can submit things to me if they want to, and questions and so on. And we sort of have daily practices like that. And the idea really, it goes back to neuroscience. It's, we always say in the brain, sort of fire it, wire it. And so it's creating little habits that will give us greater possibilities afterwards. So,
Right.
it's a bit like a path in the forest. If you walk one path a
Mm-hmm.
lot, that's the obvious one. So we have to start walking the others and opening up those paths, those other ones, so that
Right.
when we're faced with a situation where we're stressed, rather than not know what to do and freeze, we actually have another pathway. We've practiced it, we know it, we know how to integrate it. We've
Mm-hmm.
looked at the figures. And then there is specific, evidence-based strategies, be it communication. That's a huge one. Communication with, ex-partners is massive. It's a big part of what we do. So we look at, emotions, communications, strengths, goals, relationships,
Mm-hmm.
um, and how our view of life is shaping how we move forward. Because in the end, it's how we're seeing things that shapes what we're feeling, what we're doing, and what we're learning. And so
Yes.
the idea is to make sure that, be it the learning, the doing, the feeling, or how we're seeing things, the stories we tell ourselves, we have a toolbox to reach
Right.
into. And depending on where we are in, ultimately we want to have a lot of flexibility in the way we can see things. And that's
Yes.
the aim. That's where resilience sort of lies. But you need to build up to it, um,
Right.
through the learning, the doing, and the emotional regulation.
Oh, 100%. Now, if we had to take today's conversation and we had to emphasize on some important aspects, what are some of the things you really like to emphasize to the listeners today?
The main so there are two things. One, for people in general, all walks of life, situations. There's something called post-traumatic growth, and I don't know if anyone's heard about it, but it's that ability to grow from trauma. The
Mm-hmm.
challenge with research is that we know the processes, but we don't know how to kickstart it. We have to sort of hover and be ready, if we're in support services, to then accompany it. What we do
Yes.
know is that if people build up their resilience, they are way more likely, that what research shows, if you do resilience training, or your resilience is high, you're way more
Yes.
likely to experience post-traumatic growth.
Mm-hmm.
So with that in mind, I come to my second point, which is we can develop the skills to experience difficult situations differently.
Hmm.
We know it because sometimes we've reacted to something and then afterwards we go, oh, that was just ridiculous. So that's the tiny version of it. We're trying to do this in big,
Yes.
and so that we can face difficulties and know what to do, know the different processes. And then with the added bonus, which to me is the biggest point, is we are modeling that for our children, and we're
Yeah.
modeling the number one skill legacy we can leave our children with if we
Yeah.
want them to be happy. And at one point, if all goes well, they
Hmm.
will lose us and they'll be on their own, in the normal process of life. And don't we all want our kids to, to be the best prepared for that, for when we're not there? It sounds very
Yeah.
self-centered. And developing resilience and knowing how you do it and being able to model it is showing them how to do that and
Right.
giving. To me, it's the biggest gift. Even when I talk to I still, it's like the biggest gift you can give your children.
Right.
And so if you're not doing it for yourself, which you probably should, but I can see you might not be,
Yeah.
I can, it's a difficult place to be. Do it for your kids.
Right. 100%. Now, where can people find you?
Okay, I can be found. So I'll share the links, but I have a website specifically for that program. I have an email. I have a phone number. I'm based in Europe, so sometimes it's easier to reach me via WhatsApp. And I also have a couple of approaches where I think this, the way you take a car for a test drive.
Hmm.
I have a couple of approaches where people can take me for a test drive, but they don't actually have to leave their house. So what I do is people can approach me with two requests. One is for what I call a breakthrough session. What it is a coaching session. I
Hmm.
will not register them for the program or for coaching if they want one-to-one coaching for 24 hours after that, and I will not chase them up. They have to get back to me. So they can come in. My aim is for them to leave with something that's going to be useful for them.
Yes.
If that happens and I never see them again or hear from them again, that's fine. I've
Hmm.
contributed to what I believe in. And then
Yes.
if they want to work more with me, they'll know where to find me. Sometimes that's too big, especially when you're feeling small, battered, low, incompetent, lack of confidence, all those things that come with separation. Sometimes that's a bit rough. So I have
Yes.
an form with a link that will also be provided. And you just fill in the form and I'll create it's a 10-day plan, but it's in fact 2 weeks to 2 working weeks resilience plan to just try and test some little things. Obviously, it doesn't give everything, but it's just to go, okay, how would this sit with me? But I do ask for people to give me a few pieces of information, because if I say to them, meditate, and their life is really active and they don't, it's not going to work. And I say I can say that comfortably with meditation. I don't meditate. It's really not my go-to. Um, but often that's what people say to if you meditated, yeah, not everyone
Right.
has time nor the inclination. So it's what's going to then. So yes, you'll have all the links for the website, my email, my number, and for the booking just a coaching call, a breakthrough call, or a link to the form.
Wonderful. Wow, this is amazing. You've done a wonderful job helping people, especially moms who are, separated, have children. I think it's so important that they have this support. And what I love about you is that if you really look around, there aren't a lot of coaches that specialize specifically in high achieving women who are separated, who have children, who are juggling a lot of hats and are struggling with the separation. So I think what you're doing is wonderful. And I think, you took an experience from your own life, you applied it, you overcame it, and now, you are helping others, which I think is phenomenal. And I just want to commend you for that because, you overcame a very hard situation and now you're putting it to good use, helping others. So I just want to say thank you for just being you.
Well, thank you. And it does bring me so much. I'm going to call it serenity, not so much joy, because everything's not always joyful, but
Yes.
serenity and fulfillment, definitely. Doing this work, I love it.
Yes. And you're doing a great job. And thank you so much for being on the show. I really appreciate you.
Well, thank you for having me. It's been great talking to you.
Same here. You have a great day.
You too. Take care.